Okay, do we want to get started? Okay. My name is Rosemary Jaramillo. I am the Regional Director for Central and Southern Colorado Alzheimer's Association. We are a nonprofit organization. Our focus is a world without Alzheimer's and all other dementias. And so first of all, I want to say thank you to Diane for reaching out to us, inviting us here today. We had a meeting. She said, you know, we have some needs and we need some education. So we're happy to be here because that is our biggest goal. Because with education, we find that, you know, education helps build that empathy because knowledge, you know, with that knowledge, we can build empathy. That knowledge, we can build empathy. And then also today, I want to introduce you to Cindy Myers. Cindy Meyer is your Teller County veteran, say the rest of it, veteran service officer. We have a whole caregiver support team that helps with caregivers, whether they're veterans caring for someone or someone caring for a veteran. And so we want to make sure everybody has access to those resources. So thank you for coming out today. I appreciate that. So like I said, my name is Rosemary. If you have any questions during, just, you know, raise your hand or stand up or shout it out or do whatever is comfortable for you. And so just to tell you a little bit, so I do have a strong connect to Alzheimer's and dementia. Both my grandmothers had Alzheimer's and dementia, and two of my aunts, my maternal aunts, had Alzheimer's. One just died just a couple of years ago. And so now, right now, we're working with my mom who has some dementia, right? And so this is very near and dear to my heart. So educating people in the world of Alzheimer's and dementia is kind of my passion. One of the things that we also have, just to let you know, we do have other education classes, but we have another one called Healthy Living for the Brain and Body, which is a really excellent class to kind of get us back on the right track if we're off the track. And so let's get started. So, well, there you go. Okay, so today we're going to learn a little bit about Alzheimer's and dementia, recognize how it affects the brain, list risk factors, so we want to make sure we know what those risk factors are, identify stages of the disease, recognize those FDA treatments, and right now is a really, really exciting time in the treatment, right? Describe how science is advancing research, because that's very, very important. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but this is not a new disease. It's over 100 years old, right? It was diagnosed about 117 years ago, so it's not new. And then really look at some resources that we offer at the Alzheimer's Association. So. And this is just a little short video. So those numbers are frightening, right? So when I started here in 2019, we were at 5 million people in the US that had Alzheimer's. Now, here we are, just a few years later, it's actually 6.7 million. And so those numbers are increasing. And so it's important that we do find a cure. And not only that, but the entire family is affected, and it's sad. It's costing our country millions, right? And could potentially be billions. So, let's test your knowledge. Okay? So, Alzheimer's is a normal part of the aging process. How many people think it's true? Nobody thinks it's true? How many think it's false? False. So it is not a normal part of the aging process. So it does affect thinking, behavior, reasoning, and as it progresses, then it affects the ability to speak, to eat, to walk, and it really is a tragic effect. So let's test your knowledge again. People younger than 65 can get Alzheimer's. Who thinks that's true? Who thinks it's false? Very true. So it's not as common. As we age, the odds increase, but it has been diagnosed in people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, right? We call that early or younger onset Alzheimer's. And when we look at the disease, the trajectory of the disease can be, 5, 8, 20 years. So it's a huge range. So it just depends on the disease. So let's hear from our expert, and she's going to talk a little bit about what dementia and Alzheimer's and the difference between the two.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow in the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain, or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual, but there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
So we talk about an accurate diagnosis, and this is very, very important for many reasons, because we want to make sure that we're ruling out anything that it's not, because there's things that can cause some memory or brain fog, urinary tract infections, high blood pressure, diabetes. We have dehydration. So there's many, many things that can cause that. So we want to make sure we're ruling all that out before we start looking at a diagnosis. But it's important to get a diagnosis because we want to know what it is. So dementia is a symptom, and the diagnosis is Alzheimer's or Lewy bodies or whatever the other disease is. And so it's important because it is. And then the other reason is because a lot of times what happens is that long-term care insurance won't kick in until you have a specific diagnosis. And so we want to make sure those benefits are being taken care of. And then we also want to make sure we're treating it right. We don't want to make sure we're treating thinking it's dementia and it's something that we could really be taking care of easily. So let's hear from another one of our experts.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alzheimer described specific changes in the brain, what we now call the formation of plaques and tangles. Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and impacts memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has three main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to brain tissue loss and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's, such as memory loss, behavioral issues, problems with thinking, planning, and at the end stage, swallowing.
Sorry, I don't know what I did. Ouch. So that's pretty tragic, right? And so, like I said, that can go on from 5 to 20 years. It just depends. And so let's talk about some risk factors also. And we're going to test your knowledge first. Okay, so what is the greatest known risk factor? Genetics? Who thinks it's genetics? Family history? Okay. Age? Okay. So age. Yes. Because what we look at is as people after the age 65, the risk starts to increase. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's just a risk. Yeah. We got people over here elbowing and giggling. I talk about my mom having some dementia, and her and my aunt used to always kid each other because when they'd forget something, they'd giggle and they'd go, "Oh, it's the dementia. Oh, it's the dementia." And I just laugh at them because listening to them on the phone talking like two high school girls and then saying, "Oh, it's the dementia." And it was like, they were pretty hysterical. So let's hear from another expert.
Alzheimer's disease is marked by specific brain changes that result in the clinical changes in individual experiences. That is, changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. And ultimately, Alzheimer's is fatal. The exact cause for these changes is unknown, but there are some hints as to what may contribute to an individual's risk. Age is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's. And when we look at populations of people, we see an increased risk over the age of 65. However, Alzheimer's is not normal aging. Family history is also a known risk factor. Research has shown that those who have a parent or a sibling with Alzheimer's are more likely to develop the disease, and that risk increases if more than one family member has Alzheimer's. When we talk about the genes involved in Alzheimer's, there are two categories that could potentially be involved: risk genes and deterministic genes. Risk genes increases an individual's risk for developing the disease, but does not guarantee that they will develop Alzheimer's. Deterministic genes, which are rare for Alzheimer's, guarantee that the person will develop the disease.
Yeah, so for somebody like me, who my mom has dementia, my aunts had Alzheimer's, my grandmothers, so somebody like me, this is very concerning. Okay, but that's the thing. That's the exciting thing about now is that we do have some stuff coming down the pike, and we're very, very hopeful, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. So we do have a population at higher risk. Our population at higher risk are women, okay, because almost 2/3 of women are living with Alzheimer's and dementia. And then second are Black or African American women, and then our Hispanic Latino women. And so that risk increases with age, right? So now we're not only do we have this higher risk potential, but now we have the age potential. So that's a concern. We don't know why it affects women differently. That's some of the research that's being done. We don't know if it's because they live longer, because it could be a lot of different things. We just haven't figured out that dynamics of what that looks like. We talk about, so my aunt, and I can tell you, so my aunt, we didn't realize that she had anything wrong with her And my uncle lived in this small town in New Mexico, and he passed away. And so when he passed away is when everybody realized that there was something really major wrong. He was covering for her, and he would do everything, and tell her what to do, and she would just do it. But nobody realized that was what was going on. So a lot of times we don't even know what's happening. It could have been going on for, 10 years. We just don't know, right? And so, she quickly, she did decline, but she lived about 10 years after he passed. So let's talk about the stages of Alzheimer's disease, and let's hear from somebody. Teresa actually has the disease, and let's hear from her. And we'll talk about the early, middle, and late stage a little bit more, but I want you to hear from them.
I'm like an overachiever and when you're unable to deliver or you're not performing at the same pace that you once did before, that's frustrating. It's frustrating to not know where you place things. It's frustrating to not be able to explain to someone the problems that you're having. You can't articulate it in a way. It's frustrating to read something and you forgot what you read. It's frustrating to continuously have to change your password and you just changed it last week and you're constantly doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. And right, and people will look at somebody like Teresa and go, oh yeah, there's nothing wrong with you. You just need some rest, or you need. So to have the disease and to have that proper diagnosis is important, because we never want to negate their experience, right? It's like we don't want to pretend it's not happening, and so it's important. But her experience is very real. And this next one, Paul or Phil, this one is, just you'll watch it and you'll see where he kind of gets stuck a little bit. This one always kind of gets to me a little bit.
Math, I can't do a simple tip anymore. I sit there, I stare at it. It's crazy what numbers I can't deal with anymore. And in some ways, that's the disease to me. The other thing that I've increasingly been struggling with are words, which I've dealt with words my entire life. As an avid reader, as a reporter, as a writer. I struggle with them now.
So this is actually a good, that's where our communication class comes in, because we want to be able to help that person, but not hinder them or embarrass them. So I know, like when I'm having a conversation with my mother and she's telling me a story, I know I cannot interrupt her, right? That's the worst thing I can do. Or, sometimes she'll look for a word and then she'll say to me, and then I'll help her with the word. But I try not to interject my word until she's ready for it. And so just really making sure we're having that conversation is important on how to communicate and how our person wants to be communicated with, right? They might say, I want to find it myself. Just let me find it. And then we just have to honor that, because things in their world slows down, so we have to slow down. Those conversations slow down, so we have to slow down. And so that's where our communication class comes in. And so let's hear from Tom, and he's actually living with Lewy body dementia.
I think the thing that surprises me the most about my dementia is that it is progressive, and I'm finding that I'm forgetting more. And they do memory tests for me all the time at the doctor's, and so that becomes a little disconcerting at times, to see my cognitive impairment continue to decline. But again, I really have hope. I don't live really in the future. I can't live in the future. I can't worry about what the future is going to bring. I have to live for today.
So that's a good advice for all of us, though, right? Live for today, you know? And it's important, too, because, and I could tell you a little story. This is what my mom did. We go to the neurologist. I take her to the neurologist. Neurologist does her tests. She says, you know, she has her standard answers for everything. And she says, well, what's today? And she told her the date. And then we went to the restaurant after to get her little BLT, because she loves her BLT. And she says, what's the date today? And I said, And I told her, and I said, you just told the neurologist what the date was. And she went, ha, fooled her. So she has a great sense of humor, right? She's very feisty, and so we want to kind of encourage that humor. Yeah. So I said, well, you did fool her, but I don't think that's what we want to do, you know, to the neurologist. But, you know, she has her standard answers for everything. And so she says, they always ask her the same question. They've been asking her the same questions for 20 years, right? You know, do you know what day it is? Do you know what month it is? Do you know what year it is? And then they always tell her, who's the president? And she says, she has her standard answer, that idiot. Doesn't matter who the president is, she's always going, that idiot. And so they go, oh, okay, right? So she always gets her answers right. I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's, you know, we need a little something more in depth. So that's when we started going to the neurologist and getting something more in depth, right? And having her looked at and getting the brain scans. So, but she does have a great sense of humor. So here we talk about the different, the continuum, right? So we have here is the asymptomatic. So we don't have any symptoms. There might be something going on. We just don't know that that's happening. So biological changes could already be starting. And then we go the early stages, and so we're having some cognitive loss. And so we're kind of concerned a little bit. And so we start talking to people and going, I keep forgetting this, or I keep forgetting that. Or we're not telling anybody, right? We keep that to ourselves. And we change the way we do things, you know? More Post-it notes or more whatever, just mild cognitive impairment. Sorry, I should have said that. So we want to make sure, you know, that we recognize what's happening with our loved ones, right? They'll make excuses, right? It's so for example, forgetting somebody's name that they know very, very well. Okay, well, then we have to go, these are some red flags. But just paying attention. But covering is one of the things that we have to be careful of. And like my uncle was covering for my aunt, right? So mild typically involves symptoms that interfere with some daily living, not all. You might forget an appointment or something, or, you know, kind of misplace stuff. Really misplacing things and kind of being able to find them, or, you know, recognizing what everything is used for. And then we get into the moderate. And so this is more pronounced. It interferes with many daily activities, okay? And so that's where we have to be careful with driving, right? With, and I could tell you with my mom, this is probably that mild, moderate place that she was at, and she had shingles, and she went to the doctor that wasn't her doctor. She went to the emergent care. They gave her some pain medicines. Mom's itty bitty, she's tiny, so they gave her these pain medicines. She takes Tylenol maybe once a year, twice a year, and that put her in the hospital, right? we didn't know that we didn't really know this was happening to her because she wasn't communicating with us. And she ended up in the hospital, not being able to move her legs, not being able to walk. And so that's kind of that first flag, right? And then when we talked to her doctor, he said, oh, I would have only given her like a quarter of that. He's like, she should just have taken Tylenol. But lesson learned, make sure we go with her. So we made sure from then on we were at all her doctor appointments, and making sure she was telling the doctor the truth too. Yeah, because the doctor would say, "Are you still smoking?" And she'd go, "No." I'm like, "Really? Oh, you haven't had a vehicle to go get cigarettes?" And she just giggles, right? So yeah, that's the thing too, because we have to make sure that we're caring for ourselves, and those are the things that cause COPD, right? COPD affects the breathing affects the brain. So we have to be careful when we're, we want to kick these bad habits as soon as we can. So we're looking at those more pronounced symptoms that interfere with daily activities, driving, that could start being a hindrance. We have to be careful. Mom would drive places, I'm like, "Mom, you have to start driving." She's like, "Stop driving." And she went, "Well, I'm just going to the chiropractor's." And I said, "Well, what if there's, a detour and you have to go another way and now you can't figure out how to get back?" She's like, "Well, then I'll call you." Okay, that doesn't work. So we finally got the car away from her. But that was a huge concern for us. It was the car. And that's the hardest thing, because that's independence. Now you're taking our independence. And that's a very, very difficult thing. So then we get to the severe state, and that's where most of our activities and abilities start to be affected, right? So starts affecting eating, any drinking, anything that they're doing on a daily activities is tough, right? And we do have some education classes on mild, moderate, and severe, which does a deep dive on what that looks like. Any questions so far? Okay. So let me take a moment to just talk to you a little bit. How many of you in here have experienced dementia or Alzheimer's in your life? So almost everybody. And how many of you have maybe not a loved one, but you've cared for somebody like yeah. So, yeah. So, and it's a journey, right? It's a journey. So let's talk about FDA-approved treatments. So, like I said, this was first diagnosed in 1906. What was that, like 117 years ago? Right? I've done this a few times. And so then we have, between 1906 and 1996, what is that, 90 years, right? We came out with Aricept. So these medications here, Aricept, Exelon, Razidine, and Namenda, and then this one, I'm not going to say it. I tried, but I'm not. Those only help with symptoms. It's not a cure. It only helps with symptoms, right? And so we have to, so we jump ahead in 2021, aducanumab was on the market. It was approved by the FDA. It went through a fast approval process, but it was eventually approved fully by the FDA. Since then, we had lecanemab, and that's another one that was approved by the FDA. And then we have a new one, and I didn't write that down, but it's decanumab, I think, decanumab, And so that one has been approved also. And so these are intravenously fed, right? They're very, very costly. Not the millions that we're seeing, as caregivers that are millions of dollars into caregiving, but they're very costly. So Medicare has not picked that up. So we act the association, I think it was last month, actually we're in DC and we were at the Center for Medicare and we're asking them to pick it up, because they need to pay for this because, it's given in the very early stages. And so it can really extend that life, right? That the quality of life. And so we really are advocating that happens. And so the great news is the VA has picked it up, and they do cover that cost, but Medicare won't. So we're writing our Congress people. We have an advocacy team that works very, very hard to make sure they're picking up those costs. And you can actually go onto our website, alz.org, and look at advocacy, and it's simple. It's already filled out for you. You just hit your name, your email, and send it to your senators and congressmen and ask them to put pressure on the Medicare to pay for that. I just said Medicare, right? So to make sure Medicare pays for that, because it's important, right? Right now, if people are in the trials and they're getting that, they can get that for free as being part of the trials. And then that actually will pay for it for the rest of their life once they're out of the trials, which is good news. But, that's one of the things that we look at is, we want equality, and everybody, no matter of their economic income, has the right to have that resource, right? And so that's what we fight for, because we all deserve that, right? And so that's kind of my little soapbox that I stand on. So when we talk about all of this, we want to make sure you are indeed talking to your healthcare professionals, that you have your team with you, that they know that they're knowledgeable about the disease, and then we want to make sure that we're learning all the new and updated treatments. So, and that's where your health team comes into play. So let's talk about advancing Alzheimer's research, and let's hear from our Dr. Heather.
This is an incredibly exciting time in Alzheimer's and dementia research. The advancements that we've made in the last decade to understand the disease as a continuum, meaning that the biological changes are starting a decade or more before someone is experiencing the changes in the memory and thinking. This sets the stage for possible prevention. The idea that when we have the tools to identify those individuals at the earliest time point, and when we have the interventions to target individuals at that earliest time point, we can intervene to stop or slow the progression of the disease before an individual loses their memories.
That's important, right? Stop it before it gets a hold of us. And so let's hear from Dr. Carrillo.
This is growing evidence indicates that people can reduce their risk of cognitive decline by adopting key lifestyle habits. More and more research shows that factors like exercise, nutrition, and aggressive management of cardiovascular risk factors may impact our ability to slow cognitive decline as we age. And through current studies, we're exploring how certain lifestyle factors may even reduce the risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia.
So that's exciting news because, we talk about what healthy heart, a healthy brain, right? We've been talking about that for years. And so what affects the heart affects the brain. And so if we're not getting that good blood flow, that shortens that blood flow to the brain. And so that's where that healthy living for the brain and body comes in that class. So let's hear about Mary, and she's a caregiver. Let's hear from her.
a lot of hope does come from the Alzheimer's Association, all the research that is being done. Even though there is not a cure today for the disease, I know in my heart there is going to be a cure one day. And I know we're getting closer for that cure. Because even if you fail in a research study, you learn from that failure in the research study. That failure always brings progression.
So just to let you know, the Alzheimer's Association is the third largest research funder in the world. We're right behind the Chinese and the US government. So, and you know, we are a nonprofit, but raising funds for that research is so very important, because without that, we wouldn't be, we're here today. Because if you remember that continuum of those dates, that research wasn't being done. And so all of a sudden, you know, the Alzheimer's Association comes in, we start to pull our resources and start to get that research, and so that's important. So let's hear from Les, our caregiver.
It's nice to see the association spearheading in many ways the emphasis on getting the money at the federal level and at the private sector to get the research done, so that someday there will be an effective treatment, hopefully cure, hopefully prevention.
So it's very exciting. It's very exciting, and we're very, very hopeful.
I like the way both Mary and the other gentleman on the lower right speak, because we're speaking to seniors, many resort to reading lips, and they speak very distinctly and move their lips. I was like, wow, that's impressive for a caregiver.
Yes, and that's very important. And just a FYI, we have heard that several times, that our professionals talk way too fast. So, but that's excellent information. But that's exactly what we want to do when we're caring for somebody, is really everything slows down, not moving fast, you know, not, you know, they can't, you know, my mom can't rush anywhere, so we can't be in a hurry wherever we go. We have to give ourselves plenty of time to get there. You know, we know that, you know, it's going to be a little, you know, am I going to be able to park here and get her inside and easily, you know? So those are things, yeah. We want to make sure we're face to face and we're not behind them or beside them. Yeah, so there's all kinds of little tricks that we have for caregivers. Tricks and tips, I guess. So let's hear from Dr. Keith.
Participating in a clinical study is one way that everyone can get involved in a very direct way in the fight against Alzheimer's disease. And for people who currently have dementia or Alzheimer's disease, there are some additional benefits. You get access to very close medical care. You also may be among the first people to have access to the treatments that will eventually prove to work.
You might hear the phrase negative trial, which means it didn't hit the endpoint. It didn't result in an FDA-approved treatment for the disease. But I think the only negative trial is one that doesn't provide us with valuable information. If the trial is well designed and is a good scientific experiment, we can get extremely valuable data that can help plan the next trial and make it even better than the last one. And it gets you that much closer to that FDA-approved drug, to that effective treatment, and maybe someday even prevention.
So that's great to know. No failures. It's always good information, right?
By participating in clinical research, you can move us toward methods of treatment and prevention for all those affected by this devastating disease. Alzheimer's Association Trial Match is a free clinical studies matching service for those with dementia, caregivers, and healthy volunteers. To start, simply create a confidential user profile and receive a list of studies that may be a match for you. Don't just hope for a cure, help us find one.
So, and I think that's interesting, and every time I do this, I'm like, I need to sign up, because they are looking for healthy brains too, right? They want to know, you know, what does this look like, because we have to have some comparison. And so, and if you can't, we also have our helpline, and they can help you through that if you don't want to get on website, and our cards are back there. This is the best number. This is the star of the Alzheimer's Association, because you can access that 24/7. You know, they speak 200 different languages. Anywhere, anybody in the world can call this, and so it's really, really important that you have this number if you need this number. If you don't, take this back to somebody who you think needs it. Put it in the Starbucks, or put it in the Walmart, or wherever you find a place.
What happens at the end of this line? They just providing any kind of help?
When you call them and you say, you know, I just need some resources, they can help you with resources. If you call them and say, you know, I just need to chat with somebody, or I need some information about, you know, this is what I'm seeing, you know. People will call because they've had a really, really bad day and can't make it to a support group. And so they'll call and just have somebody to talk to. So whatever, you know, that need is, you know, it's an important phone number. So, let's see. So we talked about the phone number, and let's hear from, I keep wanting to call him Phil. Is his name Phil? No, that's not his name, but I will stop calling him. There, let's
I've
hear
had a couple of phone calls that I've been able to make in to the call center. When I've had a couple of quick questions that I wanted to ask. You know, there's been a couple of nights, 2 o'clock in the morning, you have questions, you have anxieties, and I was struggling dealing with them, and it's amazing. It was one of the best things I ever did, was keeping the call center on my favorites now. Just to know that there's somebody you can call who is aware of what you're going through.
You could see his struggle, his internal struggle.
When I went to the Alzheimer's Association website, which is alz.org, there I was trying to find out more about what was Alzheimer's, what really is this disease, what is younger onset Alzheimer's, what is dementia, is there a cure, how long has this been around, how many people are affected by this, where can I go for resources, where can I go for help, what do I do with this? How can I handle this? Is there more people like me out there? Is there someone that I can talk to if I need to? And there I found the support line that's 24 hours a day. And there I found where I can go for workshops, where I can go and read things and postings that people have done, where I can find out what events is happening in the Alzheimer's Association, where I can see how it's affecting people around the globe.
Yeah. So she had a lot of questions, because what happens is that you're not often going to get them in that doctor's office. And so it's important. That's where our support groups come out. We used to have a group here, a support group, and it went virtual, and it stayed virtual because some of the people in that support group moved, and so they still wanted to get together. But Paula Levy, and most of you probably know Paula Levy, she has a support group here, and so we want to make sure that everybody's aware of it. It's for caregivers, and so there was a flyer back there if you didn't see it. That's important because we want to make sure that everybody has that access, and so that flyer looks like that. We do have support groups throughout the state. We have 70 throughout the state. We have some virtual, some in person. We have men's support groups, and I think those ones might be in Denver. We have veteran support groups. We have adult children caregiver support groups, because that looks different. And so we, and then everybody's welcome, and we have Pueblo support groups in Trinidad. So if you know anybody in those areas, we do have those. And so let's hear again from one of our presenters.
Since I've been diagnosed with dementia, the one place that I know I can go to for assistance and help and support is to the Alzheimer's Association. There are people there that I know by name that I can contact if I'm having a difficult time or if I'm struggling to find some resource, that they will provide that to me.
And so this, this is so, so very important because there are a lot of groups out there, there's a lot of people out there that charge a lot of money. And so we want to make sure that we keep our resources free. And so all our resources to our caregivers are free. Access is free, and so we want to make sure that we're able to do that. And we do that actually through our walk. And so our walk is in Colorado Springs. We do not have a walk up in Woodland Park. We have it in Colorado Springs. It's a great day. It's a great morning. It's not a long walk. It's at Memorial Park. It doesn't cost anybody anything to register. You can go in and register. You can come out and join us because we want our families and our caregivers there, our supporters, our community. We have a DJ and we have lots of resources and just making sure that we have a day of community and celebration, because that's really what it is. And so hopefully one year we'll have a celebration and we'll be able to, we have these flowers. If you see these flowers, they all represent something different. See the flower? The white flower represents the first person cured. And so hopefully one day we'll all be wearing white flowers because that's important. And caring for our loved ones and caring for our caregivers. So we have caregivers out there that are very, very stressed, that they're tired. And so if you know somebody, just reach out to them. They might not know when you say, what can I do for you, right? They don't know, right? Say, do you want me to come and, hang out with your loved one for an hour so you can take a shower, right? Those are things that we can do. We have somebody, she has a friend call her husband. He's out of state, and he calls every day, talks for an hour while she gets some stuff done. And they just talk and talk and talk, right? And so those are things when we go, what can I do for you? This was, my grandfather always had this saying. He always showed up for everything, for everyone, let's say. And he always said, don't ask somebody, what can I do for you? You can look in their eyes and see what they need, right? We can look in our neighbor's eyes, in our caregiver's eyes, and know they need something. Maybe it's a meal. Maybe it's a night out, maybe walk the dog. So those are things that we can do for our community and for our caregivers, whether it's Alzheimer's or dementia or some other illness our caregivers are caring for. So those are some simple things that we can do. So those are important because we often, it's funny but not in a ha-ha way. We'll talk to caregivers and people like to do the whole, well, what are you doing for self-care? We all do that whole, what are you doing for self-care? And one of the ladies said, I got a shower and I got to this meeting. That's what I'm doing for self-care, right? And so that's the extent of what they can do. So just reaching out to your neighbors, your friends. And then if you want to go in and register for the walk, we would love to have you register or come down. You can register at the walk. You have a question?
I have a question that goes back a ways.
Oh, go back.
I assume there's still no definitive test, like a blood test or urine analysis or anything like that.
So
Alzheimer's.
there are, and I'm not in any way a medical expert, but there are some tests that they can do with spinal fluid to test some of those different, I think it's like towels and stuff, to see if it's in the spine. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
So there, and the neurologist explained to us that there is no definitive test. It's a series
Yes.
If you fall within a certain parameter, then a diagnosis can be made,
Yes.
which is difficult because without a diagnosis, you can't start all of the other services that we need. So the limbo is just
Yeah.
for people, I think it's been a,
It's trying, right? It's doctor after doctor. There is the PET scan, but Medicare won't pay for the PET scan if Alzheimer's or dementia is suspected, right? So that's another thing that we are working on at the state level to try to get that bill passed, that it should be covered. You know, you can go through MRIs and everything else, but the PET scan, and so it is a series, right? And you have to have a doctor that really has that knowledge base. And you have another question?
There's these other forms of dementia. Are there tests to identify those or rule those out?
Well, so the other forms of dementia, you have your Lewy bodies. There's like 100 different forms of dementia. So it is really, you know, it's a puzzle and you're taking out pieces. So it's not this, it's not that, it's not this, it's not that. Some of them are easy because it might be, you know, traumatic brain injury that caused it, right? So that's kind of, you're going, oh, well, that's what it is.
Pay for some of these tests, and if people can't afford them, don't a lot of people just fall into the, well, you must have Alzheimer's by default?
It could be. It could be. We don't have the results of that. We don't have knowledge of that. But we have been, there has been some communication that it might not all be Alzheimer's. And so there's been communication about that. So at a higher level, at the level of where our doctors are, of, you know, people are getting diagnosed or they're not. So are those proper diagnoses? But it is a puzzle. It's taking pieces out. Doctor's office, and she says, he said it's Alzheimer's. And she left the doctor's office, and she said, now what? And he said, come back in a year. Right? So if we walked into the doctor's office and they said, you know, you have cancer, and we'd go, well, what kind of cancer? And then they'd tell us, and then we'd be like, now what? Well, now you A, B, and C. But if they said come back in a year, we would find another doctor. Yeah. So really looking for that right fit. You know, my mom has, she had a doctor for I don't know, 40 years. He retired. She has a new doctor, and he is all about how can we help her? What tests can we get? What doctor can we send her to? You know, and just looking at, and then my sister will say, no, I don't want this doctor, I want that doctor. And he sends in the referral, and he's quick. And so making sure you're connecting with that doctor, and that doctor understands what he's seeing, right? What are we seeing? And if he doesn't understand, then he's going to send you to somebody who does, right? Right?
I believe some memory loss is a part of normal aging. At what point do you say, ooh, this might be Alzheimer's? As opposed to, oh, this is just what happens because, you know, I can't find my keys again.
When it starts affecting daily living. So when the person is no longer able to work around the house, to do things they used to love to do, to recognize things. Maybe they're driving and they're getting in accidents or they're getting lost. One of the things is, you know, we all lose our car keys, right? Yeah. But we're able to retrace our steps. Oh, this is where I was. And the person that has something really going on with them cognitively is not able to retrace those steps. They might not even recognize what those keys are for. So those are things that, you know, we're starting to get concerned, not being able to follow a recipe that they've been making for, you know, 40 years. Those are things that are concerning, right? not the everyday, this is my favorite thing, and I do it all the time. We all do it. I bet you everybody else in this room does it, is that we go and we get up, we run into the kitchen or to the bedroom, and we go, and then we go, oh, I hate when I do that. So then we go back into the other room, right? And then we go, oh, that's what I was going to do. And then you go back and get it. So with somebody that has the disease, it's actually not recognizing, that they went in there for something, might not even be recognizing the room. That's the difference. Yeah, we all do that threshold. We lose our memory when we cross that threshold. And then we pick it back up when we go. And it's really worse when you have to go up a whole flight of stairs. Right? Mm-hmm.
Are the support groups also for other types of dementias on the spectrum, like frontal temporal? Like, it just always says Alzheimer's, but what if?
Yeah, our focus is Alzheimer's and all other dementias. And so we do have, and I think it's a virtual frontal temporal dementia because it's very specific. We do have a virtual one, but the support groups in person, anybody can go to them that has any kind of dementia. Yeah.
Some people can go to look at the types, and what those symptoms are.
Yes, on our website has all the information that you need. So we can, there's so much information on there that you could put it in a book. It's a lot. Mm-hmm.
You talk about diet and exercise and cardiovascular health, but how about memory supplements like Prevgen or something like that? If you look at them, they're just vitamins. So, is there anything to those?
I don't know that I could comment on them, but we have to be careful of snake oil, right? We have to be careful. Yeah, it's very expensive.
But if you look at the ingredients, it's like, well, I'm already getting that in my vitamin.
Right.
It'll actually be 12 or something, then I'll just get a
Right.
B12 supplement.
Yeah, and there's certain things that we do need, right? We take, our vitamin D, our vitamin, a lot of people are low on B12. Those are things that we've worked with our doctor, and our doctor has said you need to take vitamin D. So I take vitamin D every day because I was sluggish and tired. And they went, well, no wonder you're sluggish and tired. You don't have no vitamin D. So,
Go outside of the sun.
I do, but when I go out in the sun, this is what I do. I have my hat on, I have my sunscreen, I have long sleeves. Yeah.
One lady talked about genetic markers that might either trigger symptoms or the actual disease. So should we all have a genetic test to see if we...
Not all of us need to, but what's her name? Maria Shriver does this whole special on, it's called the E04 gene. And so that's a really prevalent gene, and it's a genetic marker. And so you can actually look her up, and she has this video on that gene. She's really a component of the Alzheimer's Association. She a supporter, but I think that's what her mom had, or what they have. They have that gene, something. Mm-hmm. Her father, yeah. And so that's, genetic testing, and you can test for that. Yeah. I don't know if it was like the E. Maria Shriver. Maria Shriver. Yeah. Yes.
A few minutes ago, there was a discussion about doctors and so forth, and I'm a little new to this whole support business and that.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. We've got a neurologist. Should I be looking for other doctors besides a neurologist? That never even occurred to me.
Yeah, well, and so what's happening is you're working with your primary and your neurologist, and so the neurologist should be kind of maneuvering all those testings that's happening. So if there's tests, if you're going back every 6 months, and making sure the brain scans are up to date, all that stuff, and the neurologist should
So I
be.
should be asking, nobody has suggested, I mean, there was a fairly definitive test that was done. But nobody has suggested updating brain scans or anything like that, so I should be asking.
Yes, ask those questions, and we have a whole list of questions of speaking to your doctor and having that conversation with your doctor. It's on our website, and we have,
What I look for on the website, speaking to your doctor.
yeah. And so, yeah, because we don't know, right?
It never occurred to me.
It wouldn't, because we go to our doctors and we expect you're the expert and you will tell me what to do. Well, we ask those questions, what about this, or what about that, and what about, and so we don't know what questions to ask.
Like I said, those questions are really important, because I have found, in my experience, either with an aging person, sometimes the doctor doesn't want to bring it up, because it's like, well, you're already so old, which is offensive, and then with my spouse, it's like, well, you're kind of too young, and it's like, no, there's something really wrong, and to not be believed has been a really hard thing for me. And so to have those questions, so I don't get flustered or too emotional, and I'll just take a deep breath and say, here's my next question, because I need
To have a
those
list,
answers. Yeah, so, and the Alzheimer's website has excellent questions.
Yes, and that's important.
Speaking to your doctor, okay.
And so we talk about that, the diagnosis for somebody who's young, it is more difficult. Yeah, we have, because they're like, oh, no, you're just this, or you're just that, and it's possible, right? But people don't think it's possible. And so we have one of our clients in the community, and she advocates for us, and she volunteers with us, and she has younger onset, and that was her experience of nobody understanding, nobody believing what is happening with her. Yeah, they want to send you to a psychiatrist. Yeah, and so just keep advocating and asking those questions, right?
So up here, if you are a caregiver, know that Forest Ridge, the skilled nursing facility by the hospital, will provide respite care from time to time. We have people that move in for a week, for a day, a couple days, if somebody's going out of town, and to provide some respite care for,
And does Medicaid pay for that?
I don't know how it's paid. I don't know.
They do have a setup, I did Alzheimer's lock unit for years down at Brookdale, at Village Academy. And we would get what we would call frequent flyers. And what would happen is the family would put them in care for a month, because that's what Medicare would cover. And then they would go home for 4 or 5 months, and then they would re-qualify for another month. And the families would do that just to give themselves that break that they so needed for their own personal care. And we would have certain patients that would come in and be there for a month to 6 weeks, and then they'd go, and then they re-qualify in 3 months, 6 months, whatever their plan was, they'd come back.
They get to go to camp.
Yeah, they would just
Yeah.
But it works in a lot of the families as well as the patients.
Yeah.
So how does the patient do with going back and forth, though?
Usually it's not too bad the first couple of days coming in, though, would be a transition period.
It's-
Where we would have to reacclimate them to what they know, and based on their stage and how far along, sometimes it's really difficult on the caregivers, but the families need that help so much that you work through it, because we know they need that help. That's what we're there for, so.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
at some point too, all of these people understood and recognized their cognitive loss.
Yeah.
We have that gamut of, they are clueless on their cognitive loss, and they're functioning just fine and carry our conversations, and they have no idea that they have changed rooms, that they have changed units.
Right.
And if you're feeling guilty at all about using the facility, when you get to that point, that person's okay with that person
And there's also, the other resource that we use a lot that we refer is the Area Agency on Aging. So that's a very important resource. And then you have your Senior Coalition up here, which is an excellent resource. And so those are things that, you never know what new resources they're gonna have. So making sure you check on those.
What was the area agent?
Area Agency on Aging.
Area agency on aging.
Yes, and so they do have some resources available.
So how does Alzheimer's kill you?
So eventually what happens is that the person, so your brain operates everything, right? And you stop eating, you stop drinking, and then eventually you stop breathing. So. Yeah.
Where they don't know how to use it, and if they don't have someone sitting there with them, and then they're also afraid.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a spoon and you put it up and they're like, because then when they hit that end stage, it's really hard. They don't comprehend.
No.
They're very fearful, difficult to shower, to do anything with, because you can't, feel terrified, and then they're scared, and they're extremely strong.
Yes.
At that age, they just, when they hit that point, they're strong and they just can't. So you have to be extremely slow, very quiet, very methodical, and we use a lot of music in the background to keep things
Yes.
calm, so that you can do things with them without them panicking or freaking out. You come at them with a wet washcloth to wash their hands or wipe off their face, and they have no clue what you're doing. And they're afraid and they're scared and they just panic.
Yeah.
So you have to do everything you can to.
Yeah, we have a question. Let me answer your question first. So one of the things that we look at is their world starts getting smaller and smaller, right? So their world, we can see here, right? And their world starts getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so if you hold your hands up to your eyes, this is what they start to see. So anything out here is frightening. And so things start feeling different. Water feels different on the skin, right? Wash rags feel different. Things taste different, right? And then so when they can't chew and they can't swallow, they can't eat, they can't drink, and then they eventually don't breathe. So, No, you're fine.
A lot of us, as we cross into the senior citizen age, suffer from other types of neurological things, of which they also don't seem to know what causes them, like peripheral neuropathy and Parkinson's, even restless legs and so forth. Is there any increased chance of people that have other neurological problems developing Alzheimer's?
There's a huge relationship between Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. So we have, and it's interesting that you say that because my mom and my uncle and her family, they have this constant shake, but they're like, it's not Parkinson's, because when they relax, it goes away. So that's that whole thing where it's hard to understand the neurology of the system. So we don't know what that is with her, or with my uncle. So it's just her and my uncle now. They had 11 siblings, and so it's the two of them. So and we watched it. His I have to tell you, and he has some dementia also. And so we were watching him on video the other day, and he was doing his PT, and he had his little dumbbell and his coffee cup. And I'm like, see, they have a great sense of humor on my mom's side of the family, and my dad's too. But he's just doing, and then he'd switch hands, and he'd do that. Yeah, he was sitting. But for them, it affects their legs a lot. So my mom has very weak legs. So we don't know what the cause of that is, right? No. Yeah, we are. Yeah. So yeah. Well, I appreciate all of you coming out today. I'll stay around if you have questions. And so please we have information on the back, and if you have any questions, I'm here. Thank you so much.